Good afternoon. I am going to talk about Alaska's fisheries management, a management of a fisheries for sustainable resource into the future. Alaska is the most resource-rich land in the world, an estimated 5.8 billion annually, with Bristol Bay sockeye salmon, Bering Sea crab, and pollock representing some of the largest salmon, crab, and whitefish fisheries in the world. You would think a billion-dollar industry would be any management agency's priority to protect. However, many Alaskans will say this is not the case. Last summer in my community of Yakutat, the king salmon harvest was closed to subsistence and commercial fishermen, but left open to sport fishermen to harvest 1 king a day. To rub salt on the wound, the state said all subsistence and commercial fishermen had to release all kings, which once caught in a gill net has a high mortality rate. More salt on the wound. Sport anglers are allowed to harvest fish above the weir, which is a fish count for escapement goals, for spawning purposes, for healthier fish returns. Alaska regulation gives subsistence the priority over all user groups. By regulation, when escapement goals are not met, the sport fishery is always the first to get shut down by emergency order. The second would be to put limits on commercial fishery or shut it down, and subsistence would be the last. By regulation, the state is not to ever shut down subsistence. Why would the state of Alaska go against its own regulation in the management of user groups? In an effort to manage a resource, why would the Alaska Department of Fish and Game allow the take of salmon above an area that has already been counted for escapement goals? My hope is not to convince anyone to pick sides on user groups, but to get support for a management of a fisheries for sustainable resource into the future for all user groups that their grandchildren and great-grandchildren can enjoy. I will talk briefly about escapement goals and then discuss the 3 main user groups' economic impact to the state, which will show why this fishery is important on all levels. I will close by telling you how you can help. Escapement goals. Escapement is the number of fish allowed to escape the fishery and spawn. If too much fish crowd the river, sockeye will die without even spawning. An optimum escapement goal allows for sustainable runs on a biological need of stock and ensures healthy returns for the fishery. The 3 user groups. There are 3 user groups that rely on the resource: subsistence, commercial, and sport. I will briefly go over the economic impact each has on the state. Subsistence. Rural Alaskan economies operate differently from urban economies. Today, rural economies are mixed economies. Families and communities live by combining wild resource harvest with commercial wage employment. Rural economy goals are usually for the benefit of family groups rather than for the monetary profit of a business. An example of subsistence, and a poor one at that, is the TV show Alaska Bush People, which shows a family living off the land in a subsistence style year-round. I watched a couple episodes where it showed the family harvesting wild game out of season on more than one occasion, with which can never happen in the real regulated Alaska fish and game laws. We have had Alaskan Native, our local subsistence users, be fined for taking game out of season, even jailed, or have their subsistence rights to harvest taken away from them. This does not support the management of the fisheries for sustainable resource into the future. Commercial fisheries. With one of the most productive commercial fisheries in the world, the Alaska Department of Fish and Game's website has the average commercial fishing harvest between 2008 and 2012 for salmon at 790.7 million pounds and 38.4 million pounds for halibut and 92.6 million pounds for shellfish. Sports fishermen. With over 3,000 rivers, 3 million lakes, and 6,640 miles of coastline in Alaska, The biggest challenge for sports fishermen is where to fish. The Alaska sport fisheries is worth more than $500 million annually. The issue rural communities have with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game Management is they have poor enforcement on bag limits, and they do not have a harvest ticket for all sports fishermen like they do for subsistence and commercial fishermen. So the data they are collecting is an estimate at best. This does not support the management of the fisheries for a sustainable resource into the future. If you have watched the show Alaska State Troopers, you will see very little or no episodes on enforcement of bag limits for the sports fishermen. I would like to close by telling you how you can help. If you are a sport fisherman, there are two things you can do. First, respect the daily bag limit. And second, limit your fish harvest from above the weir. If you visit the state for the majestic beauty or to see the untamed wild and have no interest in harvest of salmon, you could write a letter to our Alaska delegation or the Alaska Department of Fish and Game and ask them for these three things. 1, sport angler harvest tickets, and 2, lessen the catch above the weir, and 3, put more enforcement on the rivers. And last, our tribal people have walked this land for over 1,000 years with these two laws to follow. Never harvest in spawning or rearing areas, and never take more than what you need. We welcome you to Alaska to share our resource, but practice and respect these two laws of nature. This will go a long ways in the management of Alaska's fisheries for a sustainable resource into the future. Goodness,